which, as you said, although the show came after Dallas, it was something that actually preceded Dallas in its development and in your mind. How were you able to revisit it?
We had it in the drawer. It was a presentation. We had it in the drawer, took it out.
The script?
It wasn't a script. It was just a presentation.
And how were you able to sell that to CBS at that point?
At that time, because we had already sold Dallas, and Dallas was starting, then they said, well, what else do you have? And we brought it back to them and reminded them that they had turned it down. It may have been a different regime, I'm not sure. But we said, let's go and do it. And we started to cast it. We cast, I remember casting that thing with David, and David stayed with it.
And so it wasn't really a spin-off of the show because it
Well, there was one brother we used, and then we got rid of that. But what we decided to do was that in Dallas, there were 3 brothers, and one was away. So we made him part of the Ewing family in Knots Landing. And then we sort of ran away from that after a couple of years.
Did the network want to see some actors from Dallas on the show to sort of get it launched?
No, we couldn't get them to do it. It worked pretty difficult. We did it a couple of times of him going back to Dallas rather than them going into Knots Landing, because that made more sense to us. That worked okay, but it wasn't anything. By that time, Knots was pretty much on its own feet, and we were dealing with all kinds of stories.
And it was produced also by Lorimar?
Lorimar, totally Lorimar.
And your involvement with the show, was that similar at the
Similar
beginning?
to Dallas,
got it launched
that's right. Going over the arcs.
And how did it do initially?
Very good.
Success?
Yeah. In many
My thing is, all right, now, Knots Landing in Dallas. All right, now, those were the lovely 80s.
90s.
Wasn't it the 80s?
No, those were 80s.
Yeah, definitely the 80s. Now, what was the difference between Dallas and Knots Landing as far as
He wasn't on Knots Landing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wasn't on
He
those.
got offered the part to play Gary
I'm so sorry.
Ewing.
You know what? I totally read it
That's
wrong.
right.
But
right.
you were on Dallas, correct?
No.
No, I know. I was offered to, because it was Lorimar.
Oh, I see.
A fella named Merv Andelson and then Lee Rich, and said that to come on and play Larry Hagman's brother.
Oh, right.
You know.
Yes.
And then we'll spin it off. We're going to spin it off.
All right.
I was doing a play.
Oh, you got to be kidding me, man!
In New York,
really?
Yeah.
You. Now look, I've been in musical theater my whole life. I've done 8 Broadway shows. I've been around for a while, and I recently was on House of Cards and some other shows. But the thing is that when you get offered a TV role, you give your 2-week notice, man.
Well, he did all right. He did better for himself because he got Falcon Crest.
Well,
I couldn't leave the show or the people I was working with.
Sure.
Yeah,
I think
I
one time
that.
I was working with Joanne Woodward and a lovely actress named Shirley Knight.
Oh, yeah.
I liked her a lot.
And we were doing the Children's Hour. I can't remember, but
I love
anyway.
that play. I love that movie, the second one.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to go back to Dark.
I read that you actually were offered the role of Gary Ewing on Knots Landing and you turned it down. Is that true?
Well, what happened was, and I can't recall, what happened was I was doing a play, The Children's Hour, with Joanne Woodward and Shirley Knight. We were at the Berkshire Theater Festival in the Berkshires up there. And they had been very Lorimar. It was the same company. I had done an episode, as I mentioned, on the Walton, and I was back there, and what I was told was at that time there was a role to come up, and they were going to start it on the show Dallas, and then he was going to be playing. So you'll have to tell me whether this is right or not, if you're knowledgeable about all this. He was going to be one of JR's brothers.
Mm-hmm.
and then they were going to spin that off into another show.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That is
I
correct.
had no idea what the show was, but so somebody assumed that it was Knots Landing, I guess. But I was doing the play. I didn't even think about it, because I was already doing the play.
And to be fair, this was a couple years before Dallas really became the nationwide phenomenon that it was.
Right. Yeah. And as it turned out, obviously, with the fellow who ended up playing, they got a terrific guy to play that role, Ted Shackleton.
You bet.
And but I didn't know anything about Knots Landing. I didn't know whether, they'd even had the show. But I do remember that came my way. But they had enough patience with me that not long after that, then Flamingo Road then came my way. And, of course, out of that came
Falcon Crest.
Right.
And it all worked out for the best because
it all worked out for the best.
It's probably safe to say that your best remembered for your role is charming, somewhat dastardly rogue Richard Channing on Falcon Crest.
I guess so. I tend to look at it as just another, it was another job in this whole, But that series had legs.
Talk about being a member of that cast and realizing that you had all hit on something very special.
Well, I knew it was sort of going to be fun because Jane was strong and fun, and Susan Sullivan, Hannah Alicia, Robert Foxworth.
It goes back to Dark Shadows. There was a parking lot right next door to our studio on West 53rd.
So close to my pad. You're always in my turf, yeah.
Yeah, between 10th and 11th, I think. And or 9th and 10th, yeah, maybe. Anyway, that's where our studio was, and the parking lot guy told me one day that his bosses or whatever, they had just bought. They just had a new show they were going to do, and it was called The Waltons. He knew about this, because of who he worked for in New York City. And so, lo and behold, a year or so later, I'm out in L.A., my first trip.
Really?
To L.A. Well, maybe it wasn't my first trip. No.
That was the first thing you did on TV after DS, Dark Shadows?
After Dark Shadows, I can't remember what was the first thing. I can't remember all of those things. I did Sandbox pretty quick. But anyway, I get a call, and I go over, and it's Earl to meet Earl Hamner. And Earl there was another guy there. His name was Robert Jacks. And so Earl, they put me in, they wanted me to do that episode. So I did that episode, and then, years later, I'm back in L.A. Doing a series just for a short period of time because I had something else I was going to do. It was called Flamingo Road. And
did you do that?
Anyway,
Did you do it?
I did Flamingo Road for about a season. I've been up in Boston doing a play, and a friend of mine, in the play with, but then a person from, I think it was CBS, came to see me, or NBC, whichever network, and came up to Boston and told me that they wanted me to do Flamingo Road. And the person I was in the play with, Jane Alexander, Jane says, "David, you've got to do that." So lo and behold, after that play ran over, I went out to L.A. to do Flamingo Road. Well, during one episode, we were shooting over Warner Brothers, and I'm on a sound stage, and who pops in to visit me is Earl Hamner. And Earl, and he says, we got a new show for you. And they had told me that this would be coming, and it's called Falcon Crest. So Earl was a writer and producer. Also, on Falcon Crest.
Oh, he was on Falcon Crest as well? I didn't know that.
Yeah, just for a while, but and so I went out and started my first scene after I finished what I was doing in LA. I went to New York. I waited about 2 weeks. I got a call from Lorimar Productions, and they said, come to I didn't even go to LA first. I went to Napa, where my first scene was with Jane Wyman.
How was that?
Yeah, well, that was wonderful.
You got along great with her, didn't you?
Yes. Got along just.
And the best thing out of Flamingo Road was I made, some good friends, but that's what led to Falcon Crest. So I was there, and we knew Flamingo Road wasn't going to make it. So I met the man at, a couple of people, but the man who was responsible for the Waltons, Earl Hamner. And I met Earl, and we became very good friends. And it was through Earl that we also did Falcon Crest. But the people at Lorimar Productions, they're the ones that helped me out at that particular time. Merv Andelson, who ran Lorimar, was was a friend and a supporter. And he's the one that insisted that I do Falcon Crest.
David